Hi everyone and welcome to season 2 of the Leading Beyond the Lab podcast, proudly sponsored by ARTO, the competitive edge for life sciences talent. I'm your host, Lawrence Rose, and our mission is to shine a light for aspiring scientists and physicians looking to understand what life's really like in the pharmaceutical sector. In each episode, we dive into the stories, insights, and valuable lessons learned that have propelled our guests to remarkable success and impact within their respective disease areas. Now, if you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it, be sure to hit subscribe because we'll be releasing new episodes each week. Hi Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
First day at AAD today.
It is. I just flew in last night, excited to get to the conference.
Yeah. So it's a bit of an opening tradition on the pod to talk about just give us a quick debrief of your experience and where it all began with Alpenglow.
Yeah, well, I can start at the very beginning, take you through my academic history and then how I took the jump to go into the startup world and TechBio world specifically at Alpenglow. So I was born in Chicago, went to University of Michigan undergrad. I'm a diehard Michigan Wolverine football fan, have been since I could walk. And then I went to Emory for a master's in public health and epidemiology for a while, because I do have kind of a quantitative leaning. And so that was really important and continued to be a thread throughout my career. After that, I went to Loyola Chicago for medical school and came out to University of Washington for a pathology residency. And at that point, that was when I really started to get into the technology underlying Alpenglow, because I saw as a pathology resident, I was really excited about this quantitative computational biology, how we can bring all these innovations and machine learning to this field that's really been using glass slides and is quite antiquated. And what I found is that the problem in pathology is we didn't have any digital data to even use computers. We were using glass slides, and a pathologist from the early 1900s could have walked into the lab and just been at home. So I worked with a team of engineers to build a new type of microscope to be able to digitize tissue directly and in 3D. And so that's where it all really started from an academic standpoint.
And how long? It's been 8 years now?
Yeah. It's been, actually a decade since we started this project. And
wow.
It started as an academic project where I approached an engineer and he said, that sounds like an interesting tool to work on. And so we worked side by side. That was Jonathan Liu at the University of Washington. His postdoc, Adam Glazer, actually built the microscope, and I spent a year in his lab working side by side. I had the best job because all I'd have to do is say, yes, this looks good. No, it doesn't. Could you make it faster? Higher resolution, all of these just asks, and then Adam could somehow do this. And so we worked together to build a microscope specifically for clinical tissue and the types of tissue that drug developers use. And so once it started working really well, we were at a crossroads and we wanted to get this out in the world, but we really didn't know how.
So what happened next then?
So what happened next is we explored a few different routes for commercialization. And eventually what we decided is that forming a startup and having me run the startup would be the best way to get it to market, because big companies want you to de-risk the technology.
Yeah.
And, if you get outside people in your startup, that they have the great experience, which I didn't have, but they don't know the technology and the clinical needs and drug development needs quite as well.
And how did you find applying that in an industry setting?
Yeah, so great question. So it's kind of which skills are transferable and which aren't. There's a lot to learn. I think a lot about leadership, managing people, identifying talent, also listening to customers. I think one big difference I've seen in industry versus academia, especially as a tech bio company where we're very collaborative with customers, is you have to be very humble. You're not out there saying we're the best way to do it, and all the other people have inferior technology. What you really need to do is listen to your customers or collaborators and say, oh, this is your need. Let's work together on it.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's almost a movement at the moment with TechBio and computational biology and AI. And we've seen a lot of biotechs looking to look how they can actually bring that technology on board and their expertise. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think the explosion of new computational technologies has just opened up so many possibilities. And as a traditional drug developer or even a biotech startup, it's really hard to figure out, where do I get started? Which of these new technologies do I adopt? And so there's been a new wave of companies formed, the TechBio companies, where they're technology first. They've developed the tools or the underlying technology, and they can apply them in a variety of settings. Rather than saying I'm developing a single molecule to target this specific disease and I have to select a technology, they say I'm developing a technology that could be widely applicable, and I have to either myself select the biological applications or work with other academics or industry partners to figure out where do I apply this technology.
Nice. And when it comes to leadership, how have you managed that?
Yeah, so a lot of learning, really good advisors and role models and other kind of startup founders or even mature company CEOs to help mentor. But I think the thing that I've seen that's really key in leadership is that you have to put people in a position to succeed. And so when you're hiring people or nurturing their careers, you have to make sure that the role that you have and even the work setting that you have, we're a small startup, so it's very dynamic. It has to fit their personality and their career goals.
And do you like to hire skill set or soft skills or a bit of both?
It's evolved a lot. It's a really good question. At first, I thought, it was resume and skill set, and you have this list of kind of skills, and you go through and see how many check marks someone has, and that's how you find the best candidate. But I learned that the real differentiator is someone who has a passion, can learn, and really will thrive in the setting that you're offering. And so we have a variety of people, a lot with very heavy technical backgrounds and less of a biology background. So we have a mathematics PhD who's thriving, a physics PhD who's our director of R&D. They don't have a biology background or a medical background, but they're really smart people who are very attracted to the technology, and they work with our biologists to be able to figure out how do I apply these computational skills to the problems at hand. And that's worked really well.
And when you're sifting through resumes and looking at bringing the best people on, I can imagine that in an academic setting, it's slightly more safe. Yeah. So how do you kind of understand and qualify whether or not they're going to be a good fit and be able to take that plunge into the tech bio space?
Yeah, that's a great question, because in the academic setting, it's very narrow. Someone wants to apply for a PhD or for this role, and there's only a small, it seems like there's a broad range of people, but it's really a sliver once you get into the real world. I think the challenge is sometimes you get resumes from all of these different backgrounds, and you have to figure out, is this someone who is really talented and passionate and has all the soft skills and they're going to thrive? Or is this someone who really won't fit in the role? And it's been a learning experience. It's been seeing, how do people respond during interviews when they meet the team? But there's really no magic bullet. And sometimes it helps to have a partner who can tell you, who's done this many times before and can tell you, I've seen this person, this type of person succeed in this role before.
And sometimes it's not even necessarily a negative connotation on the person. They're just not necessarily aligned with the culture that you're trying to create.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. We have a talk we give a couple of times a year where we have 3 different people. There's the academic, the startup, and then the big industry worker. And there's no judgment on which one of these people you are. It just is the recognition that there are different roles and different people out there, and you have to find the right archetype, the right personality for the role you have. If you want to work at a startup, you're going to have to be okay with change and dynamism. If you want a really well-defined role and making a small contribution to a bigger company, that's great too, but it's not the startup life.
There's tells and signs in my industry to kind of indicate whether or not they're going to be suited to that dynamic culture. Things like being very fixated on job title.
Yes.
a real fixation on the job description and going through every single task. I know that if those questions are coming, then I'll have a realistic conversation around, do you understand what happens in this sort of early stage environment? There's challenges there, and these are the reasons why. So it's interesting you said that, and it kind of alludes to that point.
Well, it's funny you say that, Lawrence, because if I had you with me in the very early stages, it would have really helped out a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly right, is that people who want that really narrow defined role, it's hard at a startup because it changes, if not weekly, sometimes daily, what you're doing. And it's very mission driven, and you have to be excited by either the problems or the underlying, biological application, something that really drives you as opposed to the title or getting satisfied with the individual job tasks.
And in the tech bio space, whereas with biotech, there's a fairly obvious pathway to where things go next steps, whether it's out licensing and licensing an acquisition or something of that nature. What's the vision for you?
Yeah, for TechBio, it's less defined because it's a newer field.
Yeah, which makes it fascinating, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting part is there is, M&A activity. However, many of these companies are early and thriving, and we don't know who the natural acquirers would be for them. Is it large pharma? Is it big tech? And so...
is it both?
Yeah, is it both? Yeah, will they merge? So the answer is, I don't know, and I don't think anyone else does. Yeah. It's early days, and it's really exciting.
Are you seeing any of the big pharmas trending in that direction yet, or is that bubbling?
Yeah, so the big pharmas are definitely collaborating quite frequently with TechBio companies. And so whether they will ultimately ingest them and say, this is so core to our company that we need to acquire this company, this startup, I don't know. But I know that they are very interested in working. And it's hard to build some of these skill sets or technologies in-house.
Yeah.
And so they partner quite a bit in our space.
Yeah, it only takes one, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then the snowball starts rolling.
Right.
It's like London bus syndrome. You wait for a bus, none come, and all of a sudden 4 come at once. I've always felt like it's the same with big pharma and acquisition activity.
That's right. There's the, follow on of like, oh, if it's a good idea for, one big pharma, it must be a good idea for me too.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's the same with investors, I find as well. Like
it is.
The portfolio. I remember radiopharmaceuticals was like that. All of us, 1 minute no one knew about it in oncology. The next thing everyone was jumping in, and hopefully it'll be the same in the tech bio space.
Yeah. Yeah. TechBio is interesting because there are different points along the drug development spectrum that these companies are being developed. And really the first and most successful is in design of molecules using AI. And so that's one where every VC in the space has to have their own, portco who does that. And that's where there's been the most big pharma activity. We're towards the other end of the spectrum, which is that you already have your molecule and you're trying to figure out, how does this actually work in tissue when I test it in animals or humans in clinical trials? And so that's a place where we think, the tech bio space and AI is kind of just scratching the surface. It's very early days, but there's tons of potential, because if you listen to panels on AI in drug development, what people can say now is we've spent enough time to know that AI works great, but if you focus very narrowly, say in designing a better molecule, you're not going to solve all your problems with AI. There's still so many other steps in the drug development process, especially clinical trials, that you've it's like a traffic where you've accelerated to a stoplight, but then you have so many other barriers ahead of you that it just makes you go faster to that first red light. And so finding that comprehensive solution, people have spoken about it, but it still hasn't been attained yet. And so that's where, the question is it just a series of technologies you string together, or is it some overarching AI that's going to completely speed up drug development?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's the patients and caregivers that are going to really benefit from this.
That's right. Yeah. And it's much needed, because when you look at R&D costs per drug, everything you read, is $2 billion.
9 out of 10, yeah.
Yeah. And it just doesn't work anymore, because we've gotten all of the low-hanging fruit. And so if you need to, find new therapies for patients who need it, you have to have new technology.
And what's been your biggest challenge then?
Yeah, our biggest challenge is, as you said, TechBio is a very new field. What we do is very new. And so there's been an awareness and education component of many people who look at tissue are used to glass slides. And when we show, you can digitize the whole thing in 3D and use AI to find all of these new features and everything, first is people say, like, why would you need to do that? And so there's an education component. And then when they see, I get much better insights into mechanism of action, or I can better predict which patients will respond, then there's, how do I actually do this? Because this is also new. So I'd say awareness and education has been our biggest challenge.
Yeah. And how did you go about actually increasing those levels?
Yeah. So a lot of it's through our partners who publish. And, when you have a publication in Cell, we had a collaborator, Andrew Song from Faisal Mahmood's lab. He published in Cell, and then people were like, I saw him using your technology to get this, great paper out there and great study. Could that fit for us? That really helps us a lot. So it's great because, people follow the science and they see people publishing, doing very interesting, important new things. And then they ask, how can I do that myself? And so what we have to do is make sure to amplify when this does happen. Please take stock that this is possible, and maybe you'd want to work with Alpenglow.
Yeah. And when you're qualifying people to join the business, what things or personality traits or cultural fits do you look for when you're qualifying the difference between someone in tech bio to biotech, pharma?
Yeah, I think it actually goes back to that job description where people who are really excited about the mission and say, I have all these skill sets and interests, and I want to help out in every way possible. I can program. I also know some biology here. Like, people who have those diverse skill sets and a real problem-solving attitude tend to work really well with us. People who are very narrowly trained and they have a specific technique they've used, and they've studied one protein their entire lives. They say, I'd like to do that, but in industry, aren't as good a fit for us. So we really need that diverse skill set, enthusiasm, and mission-driven mindset.
Yeah, I think if you're glued into the vision, it gives you energy, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And it drives fulfillment, which drives engagement, and then everything else flows with it.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic happens. It reminds me of, I think it was Steve Jobs, wasn't it, that said A players like to play with A players.
Yeah.
It brings the best out in everyone in the team dynamic.
Yeah, it really does. And, in building a team, it's a push and a pull between having diversity in every way and then also having people who have a shared mindset. And so that's been a difficult balance as well, is you want to have people who have different skill sets, different approaches to problems, but you also need to have a cohesiveness in their mission and drive. And so finding people that can fit into that culture is key. And that's where you need to have a lot of well-vetted candidates that you can go out. If you try and do it yourself, it's actually a huge time suck. And so being able to communicate the skill sets and the vision and the culture that you're building is really important.
So one of the things I always say is you can get lucky and get a good candidate, but do you know that they're the best candidate? And sometimes the value that the best candidate can provide you with, whether it's network, know-how, pragmatic expertise, it can be invaluable sometimes. So trying to work out what that is a task.
Yeah. And I think building a relationship with a recruiting firm can be really important, because if you can have this common understanding of, say, Alpenglow's culture and skill sets, then you can find people who aren't even on the market yet, but would be a great fit. So I think that first thing is self-understanding, where you have to understand your company and who does well there and what your needs are. And then once you understand that and can communicate it, then you know who you're looking for, and they might not even be on the market, but it would be a great fit.
For Alpenglow specifically then, what do you think their unique selling point is when you compare them to other tech bio companies?
Yeah, our unique selling point is we're doing stuff no one else is doing. So
At the later end.
Yeah, and when you
Because
say,
I haven't seen that before.
yeah, exactly.
I was thinking that when you were saying it. You've seen the early stage where they identify targets with AI and things like that, but I haven't seen the later stage.
Yeah, if anyone else is looking for a 3D spatial biology role, it's hard to find another Alpenglow out there because we're at such the bleeding edge of technology. And so I think our unique advantage is that it's really looking at biology and these clinical samples in a way no one ever has before. And the potential is limitless. Being so new to, being such a groundbreaker can be hard in a number of ways, but certainly if you're attracted to new technology, new science, we find that it's a pretty easy sell.
You're an innovator.
Yeah.
And how do you identify what targets to go after?
Yeah, great question. So this is where I've learned to have some humility because we had some disease focus areas going into, developing the technology. And early on, we had a couple of diseases that we thought were the perfect fit. And we worked with people and they're like, yes, theoretically, I'll give a specific example, actually. We were looking at MASH or, liver fibrosis and steatosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And in theory, that was the perfect application of our technology. It's a very 3D problem. You're looking at the fibrosis of the liver and fat distribution and all these things that are very hard to see in 2D. There's a huge problem in clinical trials where everyone knew this was being measured incorrectly with glass slides. And so on paper, and it's a massive field with lots of drug activity and investment. And so on paper, it was a great fit. What we found is that in practice, people actually don't get liver biopsies clinically. That's not how you're diagnosed with fatty liver disease. And so while they're required for clinical trials, they aren't required in clinical practice. And so drug developers, although they couldn't articulate it, we had to kind of read through the lines here. What they were thinking is, if we have this risky new technology, even if it works great, why are we investing in this if people aren't going to get a biopsy in clinical practice? And I think that's a really important question that we should have been asking ourselves, and it's important to patient care and actual implementation. And so that was a swing and a miss. It was a fit on so many levels, but I think it was more a fit from an academic standpoint than a business standpoint. Whereas with dermatology, what we found is I didn't have a specific, and neither did any of our kind of associated scientists with the company, have a specific problem in dermatology where we could go after. And so we're like, it could make sense on some levels, but there's nothing specific here. And what we found is that dermatologists are so visual. And whenever they look at the skin, they're kind of imagining, how is this lesion growing in 3D? They have all these questions in their head. Same with drug developers. And so when we showed our technology and started to do some pilot projects, everyone we spoke to was just like, oh, and I could use it here and here and here. And it captured their imagination. And so we've learned to really listen to the customers and the people doing the science and doing the drug development and not come in with too many preconceived notions, because we're likely to be wrong. We need to talk to the people who do this every day.
That's kind of the way a biotech or a tech bio work, isn't it? You race at 100 miles an hour, waiting to see what happens and where the challenges will be, and adapt as you go.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's where I suppose the pragmatic and know-how can really help.
Yes, yeah. And that's where being a startup is really exciting, because a larger company, you set your strategy and it's hard to correct course. In a startup, the one analogy people give is startups are jet skis and, big companies are cruise ships. So cruise ships are great if they're going in the right direction. To
turn this anchor it takes a while, right?
Yeah, when you're headed for that, iceberg, you need to be, it's better to be a jet ski.
So when you came out of that academic setting, where clearly you've got an esteemed background, you're now working in TechBio, which is all driven by pragmatic know-how. You've got to liaise with cross-functional department heads, investors, advisors. How did you go about communicating your message in a way that they can understand? Because you're not any longer an academic institute.
That's a great question. Yeah, originally it was very difficult. And I think that was a gap in the pitch. It was great scientifically, but how do you, go to benefits rather than features? is the big step I find for myself and other scientific founders. And so that evolved naturally over time when we started to see the benefits in our customers and see how does our technology actually benefit dermatology drug development. And then we could go out and pitch and say, hey, we just showed the nervous system in 3D. We showed how this new drug actually works in human tissue, never been seen before. And so now our sponsor has a much better idea of which biomarkers to use, which patients to target, which new programs to launch. When you start to tell those stories, then everyone understands, as opposed to saying, we have a light sheet that goes at this angle. It might be cool academically, but it's not really a benefit. It's just a technological feature.
So you kind of had the end in mind, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, as in commercialization. So pragmatically, how can this go to market?
Yeah, so going to market, what we want to do is democratize access to our technology. And so what we did as a business is that we tried to make as flexible a model as possible. The best way to work with our tool is to actually own it and use it yourself. But we found that some, especially smaller biotechs, struggle with that. So we set up a services operation, and we actually have a couple of different options. Wow. And so they can send tissue, do their analysis, and then get the results back as well. And so we found that having that flexibility has been really helpful. But ultimately, the goal is to get people owning our microscope and software and using it themselves. And that's where we've seen these programs really take off, is when you're a heavy user of the technology.
And have you found that in your environment where there is limited people that have that expertise, that you've had to cast your net wider in terms of remote working and things like that? Or do you need them in the lab? How do you go about that?
We have, yeah. We haven't intentionally done this, but we're a 20-person startup, but we have people on 3 continents, and we in many time zones. We actually can't have an all-hands meeting that works for everyone. And it's because there's talent globally. We work computationally, and so you can work off-site. You don't have to be in the same lab as everyone else. And it really benefits us to have the best talent and the best personalities at Alpenglow. We have a computational scientist who's wonderful in Australia, and she's working when everyone else is sleeping.
I was going to say, how do you bridge that gap to communicate?
A lot of remote communication, Slack. Everyone kind of gives a little bit. Maybe someone stays later at work, someone wakes up earlier, so that we can have a few in-person interactions as well.
Yeah, that's nice. It's like a team dynamic.
Yeah, exactly.
So when do you think the next trigger for growth will be then?
Yeah, so in a month or two, we're going to announce a very large strategic partnership.
Oh, nice.
And so that is going to be our next inflection point. And I wish I could announce it now, but it'll be...
this would be the best platform for it, wouldn't it?
Yes, that's right. So, but as soon as that's announced, we're going to be growing, and it'll be a really exciting time for Alpenglow.
What do you think? How do you think the challenges will evolve when that happens?
Yeah, it's as soon as you hit one milestone and inflection point, then you have a whole new set of challenges, right?
That's the way it is.
Yeah. One of the challenges is going to be growing as a team and trying to maintain the right culture and actually evolving the culture to fit the organization as we get bigger. And another set of problems we're going to have, really challenges, it's a better way to put it, is we're going to be moving towards clinical applications. And so we'll have regulatory and kind of clinical reimbursement challenges to face. Those are very solvable problems, though, and they're ones we're excited as a company, because that means we're this much closer to actually
progress.
Yeah, impacting patients.
And that's where pragmatic know-how really comes in, isn't it?
It is. That's where it's really nice to be a clinician founder, is that there are a lot of quirks, especially in the American medical system, a little bit easier in the UK.
Yeah.
But in the American medical system, there are just so many quirks to it that having experienced it as a provider can be really helpful.
Well, we've got an interesting healthcare system in our own country.
Certainly, yeah. Like pros and cons with every different system.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So one thing we tend to do as a closing tradition of this podcast is do a quickfire round.
Sure, this sounds great.
Yeah. So what 3 personality traits do you think make a great leader in this environment?
Great leader. I think flexibility is very important. Clarity of vision. And then I think the final one would be maybe a sense of humor. is important. And
I think that goes for life, right?
yes,
I think if you're someone that takes on risk, you've got to be able to laugh at yourself and laugh with others.
that's right.
Because it makes it fun.
Yeah. And if you take it too seriously, you're going to burn yourself out. You have to, have some sort of sense of humor, especially with all the challenges you face. I find that just having, a capacity to find humor and irony is really important.
You're talking like a British person now. There's a satire, sarcasm, isn't there?
That's right.
I think Ricky Gervais. And the last question is, what do you think makes a good person in TechBio?
I think willingness to learn is by far the most important. The most of your learning is in front of you rather than behind you in TechBio, because no matter what you bring to the table, whether it's a more tech background or bio background, you have to learn the other part of the field. And so people who have a passion and excitement for learning do great in TechBio.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I wish you and Alpenglow all the best.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much.